everyone. I'm Tiffani Neilson, and with me is Ali Daniali of Harvest. How are you doing today, Ali?
I'm doing wonderful. Nice to see you again, Tiffany.
Great to see you as well. And I was so fascinated and interested in your background. Can you tell us more about your background and expertise?
Absolutely. I have been a uh, developer and software architect and inventor since college, and um, I have, in the last, I guess, 12 years, been in telecommunications, working from developing hardware in 5G to XR, AR, and all sorts of different kinds of technologies for telecommunications. And recently left T-Mobile to begin a new venture called Harvest that we're going to talk about.
Well, before you dive into that topic, can you tell us a little about how you've seen Agrotech evolve over the years?
Well, over the years, it's been a play with big ag. I think significantly for the U.S., it has started post World War II, where U.S. government really supported and subsidized big ag, and small to medium sized farms really went away in the U.S. and replaced by large industrial complexes of farming and trucking of a lot of food across the nation, up until the 60s, with a revolution of sustainability, of really getting back to organics and local. That really the mindset of Americans changed from that they can get their food from locally sourced, and becoming less reliant on big ag, but it still has a huge foothold. And part of our supply chain problems that we see are a byproduct of what has happened in the past, and our resilience has for food has diminished because we are so dependent of food coming from being distributed from a large distance. So we're having to deal with those, and that's so agriculture and ag tech is moving towards being more decentralized, being more reliant on using technology to solve problems, uh, and having the opportunity to connect your from your food source directly to the consumer, um, through all the model of community supported agriculture, moving from uh, the in real person to the actual website version of it. So I see a future where agriculture is becoming more dependent on technology for traceability, for understanding of what customers want, getting their sentiment of what they want, and food manufacturing changing and being really understanding that to deliver exactly matching what demand is to supply.
And Ali, your indoor farm as a service is so innovative. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. I started this journey as a grower, hydroponics grower, about 2 years ago, and I wanted to establish a growing system here in Western Washington as a side business. And when I did my due diligence with a lot of growers, what I found out that they're faced with two reoccurring problems. One is, what will they grow next, and who will they sell it to? And these reoccurring problems were weekly questions that were being guessed at. It wasn't data driven. And being a technologist and coming from developing lots of different kinds of software solutions, I'm very data driven. And before I jumped into this solution of getting into hydroponics and shipping container farming, and I had to solve this one problem. Well, it's a pretty big problem. This last mile sales problem for these growers because I was going to be one. So what I figured out is what's unique about vertical hydroponic growing is that because it's such controlled environment, it becomes a known quantity. It becomes something that you are able to understand all of the inputs and understand the outputs and the yield, and very similar to how Airbnb is able to book a house or condo or your vacation home for you. I took that model and placed it on the vertical farm system of being able to allow the supply side to be completely managed and booked, and an order to be placed directly from the demand side, like food service and restaurants, and have those two matched completely. And what that turns out to be is a software as a service where a buyer of, let's say, well, for ease of conversation, lettuce, a buyer of lettuce can book a grow capacity that's very close to them and have that particular system grow exactly what they want. Whether it's 1,000 pounds or 2,500 pounds of lettuce, I can then bring that kind of scale and order to small and medium sized growers. And that's where really this whole farm as a service is really coming and been coined as, is because you can book the right kind of grow capacity for your produce needs.
And you've really taken data driven insights to the next level, because digital twins are something that we talk about in nearly every webinar. But can you tell us about how you're applying that to vertical farming?
Well, that is exactly what we're doing. The ability to create this digital twin is my understanding from when I was building AR and VR systems, and uh, really mapping out the the system or the area to be able to bring in a lot of different data for people who are immersed. And I took those lessons and really applying it to managing an indoor farm, an indoor vertical farm, because having a digital twin allows for our platform connected to a crop management software to understand very closely how every step of the grow process is being taken care of, so that from seed to harvest, we care. We actually give a damn about it. And unlike any other distributor of fresh produce, we really care about that. And understanding that digital twin of a vertical farm, whether it's data about where a certain seedling is, has it been planted, is it at its optimal growing state and ready to be harvested so that we can pick it up and distribute it. Those are all important to be able to see in at both programmatically inside of our platform, but also we're working on augmented reality solutions so that the actual grower can put on a AR device and understand that data that's coming, the 80 pieces of data every, most of these shipping container farms or large indoor vertical farms have a lot of IoT data. So being able to consume that using augmented reality will be a game changer, because one, their hands need to be free. Holding a phone really doesn't make a sense to put it in front of them, but that data is extremely important in real time for them to make decisions about sales. What are they going to grow next? How is their crop doing? How are their crop management software data actually telling them about what to do next and how to harvest? And that's a lot of information for a grower to digest in one sitting. So being able to chunk that information when it's appropriate, using spatial anchors, being able to bring IoT data with instructions on how to do it or support information is super important. So we're taking digital twins all the way through in realizing it, and even in augmented reality, to create a solution that's key for vertical growers, vertical indoor farm growers.
Thank you, Ollie. That's amazing. And do you feel that our experience with food is changing?
Well, I would ask you as well. I mean, isn't your experience with food changing? I mean, beyond the taste profile, where we're actually in a time. I think we are getting to experience food and real taste of food and nutrition in ways that we haven't in the past. I think in my lifetime, I've been always dealing with big ag, and what big ag has been giving me is produce or fresh food. Um, so it's you know I think everyone is has an opportunity to really get closer to understanding what the taste profile of fresh produce really is supposed to be, getting better nutrients. I don't know, Tiffany, did you know that 30% of vitamin C of spinach is lost within 24 hours of it being harvested?
I had no idea.
Yeah, so what you're getting after it's been packed and trucked has lost so much of its nutrition. And vitamin C is one of the top uh, important nutrients, that other nutrients kind of follow along with that. So if we're, because of the way distribution system has been set up, we're all kind of eating, roughage, really, without nutrients. That's why it's so important to get fresher produce on our plates. And whether it's, being on a farm, if you're lucky enough to be close to a farmer and getting fresh, or going to farm stands, or going to a farmer's market and getting fresher produce, those are important. But not everyone has access like that. And part of our mission is really looking at places where there's a lack of equitable food distribution, and providing the same access to fresh produce that uh, the rest of us have. So by understanding both the demand and the supply side through the harvest network, we're able to actually foster farming in places where there is a lack of supply. We can come back and use our data again to show, hey, we need better production, we need fresher produce in this area. How can we do that and address it?
And I'm curious, now you've piqued my interest. When it goes through the canning process for a vegetable like spinach, how many additional nutrients are lost?
I'm not that person to answer that question. I'm in food packaging, especially canning. I do know that for frozen foods, um, when food is flash frozen at the farm, it tends to lock in more of the nutrients. So if you have the opportunity to choose between frozen peas and fresh peas, I think the BBC did a piece about this, where they showed that the nutrient level was much higher for frozen, because it locked in the nutrients. And I would assume that for other kinds of varieties, but except berries, I think berries were the exception. Um, Flash frozen was able to retain, because it kind of locked everything in place. Of course, that's really a lot more expensive in terms of produce, because you are paying then at that point, as it's been flash frozen, you're paying for it to stay at the temperature that keeps it frozen. So incrementally, the cost of ownership of that produce then becomes much higher. And I think that is really a point that consumers need to understand. Even though that head of lettuce that you're buying at the grocery store, that let's say is $1.85, and it was grown in soil, you, the true cost of ownership, a lot of that has been subsidized and has been pushed to the next person in years to come. And what I mean by that is that head of lettuce has, even though it's used sun, to grow, it has consumed a lot of transportation costs and CO2 and emissions to get it to that grocery store. It has used 250 times more water than a head of lettuce that was grown in a shipping container or vertical farm. So it even though you're seeing a head of lettuce as $1.85, and maybe right next to it another head of lettuce that was grown indoors and it's $2.25, the true cost of ownership of that head of lettuce from that traditional farm is a lot higher. We just don't necessarily pay it in our pocketbook, but it's being subsidized, somebody else dealing with the problems that come with it, right? And you're seeing that we have droughts, that water is hard to come by. You have fires, you have labor shortages, you have transportation, fuel things that are happening. So all of those are how we kick it down, the road with some of these grown produce, where we are actually realizing the cost of that head of lettuce that's grown indoors immediately when we're buying it coming from a vertical farm, because everything's there. So you've actually paid your way, your dues to consuming that, and you're not handing that problem to somebody else. Now, that is it's a shift of how we look at our food. And I think as we can have these types of conversations and talk about this total cost of ownership of our food more often, then we can realize that, yes, for things like leafy greens and mushrooms, things that are very high water consumption, that it makes sense to shift all that to indoor vertical farming. I mean, within 6 to 7 years, I see that all lettuce that's consumed by us will be grown indoors because it just makes more sense. It doesn't make sense to spend 250 times more water to grow that head of lettuce when you're in a drought, right? It's important to see that shift and recognize that you're not only helping the environment, which is an intrinsic value, but it's lasting longer on in your refrigerator, because it hasn't been trucked a while, and it's more nutritious. So it's a win-win, and maybe a little bit of a premium of price that we have to pay today to save tomorrow.
Thank you, Ollie. That's very interesting. And my final question is, what do you predict for the future of food?
Well, I kind of mentioned that I think um, produce that is very water intensive, and with the way that our environmental challenges we're facing, it's going to become a why didn't we do this earlier kind of realization. So, and to be able, but if every piece of lettuce you're going to eat is going to come from indoors, that means there has to be a shift in amount of square footage that is dedicated to indoor growing. So that when you take that, I think in the future we have to have municipalities, we have to have cities and states truly understanding what it means to grow indoors and change the zoning laws to allow urban growing to happen much closer to where people consume, and allowing that is something that I see it happening, but it needs to happen a lot faster, especially if we want to address the food equitability challenges uh, for places that in my neck of the woods. I mean, Tukwila, Washington, is faced with those challenges. So it's really important to be able to change those laws to allow farming closer, because it just isn't there yet. So I think that's part of the future. Another piece is being able to connect demand and supply much better. I think if you don't grow things that people don't haven't aren't going to consume, then you're going to reduce waste. I think waste right now happens when that supply and demand don't match very well, and things spoil faster, and they you have to then dump it. So being able to have systems like harvest that match up the demand and supply very well, bring efficiency into the distribution side, will have trickle down effects on a lot of other systems, that then we can realize efficiencies in emissions. We can see job creation from it, bringing again that local farmer and bringing education to grow urban agriculture, bring it to uh, back into our economy, where right now it's been going the other direction.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Ali, and we look forward to featuring you again on a future Industry Insights webinars.
Thank you, Tiffany. It's been a pleasure.
Have a great day.
Thank you.